Karun and Jensen were like, oh, Mercedes, it could be a six-way fucking pole here. Honestly, Valtteri, this is Valtteri fucking 2.0. This is Valtteri 2.0, this is. By the time about 8 o'clock came round on the Sky coverage, obviously, it was just before the Martin Brundle iconic grid walk. Obviously, it's always iconic, it always is, but this one, seeing all the celebrities on the grid, and obviously that moment where he thought that Paolo Banchero was Patrick Mahomes. Hello and welcome back to the SJMoores Podcast. This is, I've lost count of episodes at this point. It's, I think, episode 6 of the podcast. Today, as you can tell by our title, we're going to be discussing the Miami Grand Prix. And it was an interesting weekend, to say the least. It was incredibly hyped. Incredibly hyped. I had to put the emphasis on it there because I think perhaps a little bit too hyped. But anyway, we did get some racing, especially towards the end. And we've got a lot of talking points about the weekend as well, so I'm looking forward to discussing them over the next couple minutes, or probably the next hour or so. I expect that's the normal length of these sort of podcasts if you are new around here. And if you are new around here as well, don't hesitate to give us a review. Don't hesitate to follow me on Twitter. It's at TheSJMoores on all platforms. It does really help me sort of seeing the effects of the podcast as well. We also got a TikTok as well. It's at the SJMoores as well. Well, sorry, I've got a TikTok. It's at the SJMoores as well. I always say we, but it's not we, it's me. But I always post clips of the podcast, especially the last 2 I have as well. So there will be a clip from this podcast going on TikTok and on YouTube and on Instagram as well. Just waiting for the camera to focus if you're watching the video version. But yeah, it was it was a very interesting weekend. So without further ado, let's go into the breakdown of the Miami Grand Prix. So as always, we're just going to go through the weekend in chronological order and then just sort of just recap the story, go through the weekend as it happened, and then towards the end, basically just do a brief overview and then grade the drivers individually on how they did. So with all that put in place, let's talk about Friday first. Okay, so a couple of teams had a few new parts. A lot of upgrades came to this Grand Prix as well. Obviously, there being a 2-week break does help that. So Mercedes brought, I think it was, a massive package. Mercedes, they brought a front, rear and beam wing. So that's 3 new parts like that. They're the biggest upgrade package of anyone in the paddock. And nothing from Red Bull at all. And that was also the case with AlphaTauri and Aston Martin too. They didn't bring anything else. Ferrari had a new rear wing, and McLaren had a new front suspension floor edge as well. So the 2 Ferrari and McLaren had a little bit of an upgrade there, but nothing on the level of Mercedes. Alpine produced a new rear brake drum, and Haas had a new rear wing. And Williams and Alfa Romeo both had new side pod cooling loops as well. So as Friday practice began, we got obviously a little glimpse of what the weekend ahead. I've got here in my notes a lot of hype on this Grand Prix. Massive fan here, very Super Bowl-like actually, to be fair, very Super Bowl-like. The days and days of events going up until the big event on a Sunday, which obviously happens in the Super Bowl as well. It is very American. Obviously, me personally, I love American sports. I'm a big NFL fan. I watch a little bit of basketball, a little bit of baseball, not too much hockey, but I'm a massive American sports fan. It's probably, the NFL is probably my most watched sport in the season is on. It's a great league, especially for entertainment as well. I do love American sports, but F1's always felt a little bit different to that. It is very European, and it feels weird having all this Americanization onto it. And I'm used to it. Now, a lot of people on Twitter, from what I saw on Sunday, especially, are not happy with it. They seem very confused, very cringy as well. Everyone's there, and you've got to try and milk the money cow as much as possible. And Tom Garfinkel, the Miami Dolphins CEO, he's an awesome guy. He's put on so much. He's been involved in the stadium redevelopment, getting the Super Bowl to Miami in 2020, getting multiple national championship games there, getting the Miami Open underway in the Hard Rock Stadium as well, getting all these things underway. He has a vision, and he's very, very good at putting on these sort of events. And event-wise, it was a pretty well-run event. Now, there are a couple of things that I do want to talk about. One being the fake marina. That's a joke. It was kind of like we saw like rumours of it like about a week before, and then we just saw these pictures on RaceWeek just popping up like, oh my god, look at this, and it was just a joke. And then what topped it off was the video that Sky put out on Sky Sports News of Craig Slater swimming backstroke on the fake paint in Marina. That was very funny. Like, don't get me wrong, I looked all right on camera, but it's a little bit over the top for my liking. Okay, so into the actual running in practice. So we'll start with practice 1. The Mercedes was looking really good, like, you know, not like Red Bull, Ferrari good, but they were closer to Red Bull and Ferrari than they were in the midfield, if you get me. I got here similar to where they were in Oz, maybe better. So obviously in Australia, Mercedes were by far the third best team. I thought maybe better because, you know, I mean, Sky were talking it up, like Karun and Jensen were like, oh, Mercedes, it could be a 6-way fight for pole here. You know, obviously all 3 teams go for pole, but yeah, by the time Saturday came around, it wasn't that way, as we'll get into in a bit. And the rest of practice was sort of just as you'd expect. Like, no one was really out of position. It was just pretty much as you'd expect a practice session to be at a new track. Midway through though, Valtteri Bottas did have an incident. I can't remember where it was at. I don't think it was at turn 14 that a couple other drivers had an incident at. It might have been, but I can't remember. I don't think it was. So Valtteri Bottas had an off midway through the session. He lost the rear and it just went back and he went back into the wall. And obviously red flag. The session was paused for about 10 minutes or so, I think it was at the time. And the Alfa Romeo team had a lot of repair work to do ahead of Saturday. But that was pretty much it for practice 1. Then practice 2 came in the afternoon, or, you know, very, very late night in Europe as it was. I think it was practice FP2 was 10 o'clock, something like that. On Friday evening. So Bottas was out for the session, obviously, because the Alpha team were just repairing his car. The Red Bull was really struggling with reliability in the session. Like, Max Verstappen had to have a gearbox change at the start of the session. So he was out for about 20-30 minutes or so. The start of the session was Verstappen, because they were doing that because they had issues early in the day, but like in practice 1 it didn't actually seem like it was as bad as it was. And when FP2 came around, there was a lot of, you know, distracted running for Red Bull. But they did manage to get Verstappen out because there was a red flag. That red flag was caused by Carlos Sainz, another Carlos Sainz incident. This one was at turn 14. It was the first of many offs at turn 14 over the weekend. It's annoying as well because Carlos was fastest in the session at the time. He was having a great weekend up to that point, and then obviously the car had some damage, and then obviously there was a red flag as well as he put it into the wall. I don't know, maybe because that corners, like that sort of chicane section, turn 14 is darker because there's the highway bridge above it. Maybe that's something that catches them out, or maybe it's just the fact it's a narrow. It's like the Sochi chicane, you know, the one coming down from the middle straight in Sochi. It's a bit like that. It sort of goes up and round and then up there. That did catch a lot of the drivers out all weekend. But no, so the Sainz crash caused a red flag, so it allowed Verstappen's side of the garage to get more time repairing the car, getting everything back together, and then after the red flag he was ready to go out for about half the session or so. As soon as Verstappen got away though, he had another issue. This one was it was with the brakes. There was it was 2 issues, I guess, if you put it that way. So he came onto the radio like, I can't steer. He was really struggling to steer. It was similar to the one, was it Australia? I think that issue was. So yeah, it was similar to that. And then as he was getting back to the pits to fix the issue, his brakes started smoking, and you could see a little fire at the back of the car. So that put him out, obviously, for the rest of the session as well. So Red Bull got very little running going in FP2. So that was literally just most of Friday gone for him. And then George Russell is the only thing we need to talk about from FP2 as well, because I think you can't really take much from practice anyway. But George Russell was fastest in that session as well. So it showed that Mercedes had the pace. They had a pretty good setup going into Saturday. And then on Saturday, we just saw a completely different Mercedes. And the reason behind this as well is because I think the Mercedes is a very small window to get right. Mercedes, if they can get it right, then they are the third fastest team. Or they were before they got all the upgrades and stuff, but now they are probably the third fastest team by far. But yeah, Mercedes were looking, up there, Red Bull and Ferrari getting it right in this or on Friday certainly they were. It was a little glimmer of hope for us British fans particularly, who obviously want Lewis to win his 8th World Championship. It was we saw that. Obviously it's not going to happen this year. He ruled that out weeks ago. It's not going to happen this year, but just something nice to see Lewis winning races. Like, I hope by Silverstone, for example, we'll be able to see a competitive Mercedes with Lewis and George, at least challenge for podium places when I'm there in a couple of months' time. Like, that's personally what I'm hoping anyway. So yeah, on to Saturday in practice. So obviously I mentioned that Mercedes were looking very quick, and then they just like their midfield team on Saturday. They were running opposite the other cars. They were running. They were so they did a soft run, then everybody else did a soft run about 10 minutes later, for example. So they were, the track evolution did sort of hamper their times, but they were sort of where McLaren have been all weekend at that point on Saturday. But yeah, the only other thing we can really note about practice 3 is that Ocon had a similar crash to Sainz. Now, Ocon and Sainz had a little chat afterwards as well, and they were saying that they think there should have been a turbo barrier at turn 14 because they had 51 G impact with their crash, which is mental. Like, yeah, they both believed it was probably one of their biggest shunts, if not their biggest shunt in their Formula 1 career. And obviously Sainz and Ocon have been in their Formula 1 for 6 years now, 7 years. It's, they've been, obviously Ocon had a year out, but they're pretty experienced when you compare to the likes of Lando or obviously and George and Alex, and then obviously the generation after that with like Mick and Guan Yu Zhou. They Sainz and Ocon are pretty experienced drivers now when you think about it. Yeah, so the Ocon incident actually kept him out of qualifying as well. And Max Verstappen was very lucky to not have a similar off. He did the same mistake as the other two, but he was so quick on the brakes that he managed to just you could just see, you could hear. Honestly, it was just Martin Brundle was very well done in practice 3. I think it was Martin anyway. I can't remember, but it was Max did a very, very good job at not plonking his rear wing in the wall of turn 14. It was it was very very lucky for Max, really, when you think about it. But that turn 14 was catching everyone out, really. That's the only thing you can really take away from practice. So qualifying, as I said, Ocon wasn't taken part. He'll start P20 in the race because of the turn 14 crash in practice 3. And then early on in qualifying, Lewis Hamilton backed out of his first one. He went for another lap on warmer tyres a couple minutes later, but he was 8/10 off George. So he was P13, didn't really get the lap he would have wanted in. There were no real surprises sort of position-wise, obviously, other than Lewis. The people go for 3 runs because they were just sort of trying to... because the track was getting warmer and warmer as the temperatures were going down, so they were just trying to get basically, obviously, the best lap away for qualifying, which you see quite a lot. But it was like a Monaco quali almost. There was, especially in Q1, there were a lot of drivers out on track for the majority of the 18 minutes. See, Lewis's best lap, the one I was just going on about earlier, the one that was 8/10 of George, that was actually deleted for a track limit. So he was trying to get another lap on the used tyres, but that forced him to try on another set of soft tyres that he didn't want to use towards the end of the qualifying session. So with 2 minutes left in the qualifying session, obviously, because people were setting times at different points and stuff, just because of the way the track was evolving. So it was the Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz top 3, hardly surprising. And then notable cars in the elimination zone. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton with the track limits deletion was in the elimination zone, as was Fernando Alonso, and those 2 cars are way too quick to be eliminated in Q1, so they had a little bit of pressure going on to them into the final 2 minutes or so. Hamilton did get his lap together. He went up to P5 and Alonso P6, so they managed to get the lap together when they needed it the most. And then obviously we've set up a top 5 of Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, then Lewis Hamilton in P5. That's our top 5 in Q1. And then the cars that were eliminated were obviously Ocon in P20, Latifi in 19th, Albon in 18th, hardly surprised at the way the Williams has been. And then Guan Yu Zhou was in 17th, and Kevin Magnussen 16th. So K-Mag getting out qualified by Mick. So K-Mag did the last 2 races or so will come back down to earth a little bit. Now, he's still an extraordinary driver, don't get me wrong, but I think the sort of the bump into F1 has sort of come back, because you see that a lot, actually. You see a lot of drivers in in their first races in F1 to have like an amazing result, and then as time goes on, they sort of go down like that. Especially, I'm talking about rookies, of course, but they go down like that, and then obviously they'll level off again towards the end of the season as they get more experienced with the car. But you do see like a little rookie bump, and obviously Magnussen, who's not been in the car for a year, he had a little bit of he's in a little bit of a bump now. But I mean, don't get me wrong, he's still having a hell of a season. Like, well, fair play, K-Mag. So Q2 soon came along. And after the initial run, so the first run on the first set of soft tyres, so it was Verstappen, Perez, 1-2, Sainz, Leclerc, and Hamilton again, so the same top 5 as it was in Q1. No surprises there, and I got hit. It's going to be a 4-way fight for pole rather than 6, because obviously they were talking about the whole 6 way fight for pole in Friday. There's no way that was happening by the time Saturday came around. Mercedes was still right, but the Mercedes wasn't like the other two cars. But yeah, so but Russell the reason why Russell wasn't mentioned in initial run as well is because he actually didn't set a push lap in the first runs when qualifying. He tried twice but messed up. Something must have gone wrong on the second one round, because when everybody else was crossing the line, about to start their push lap, George pit. Maybe they thought they were safe, but the track looked to be evolving, and George got caught out, and he got as we know, he got caught out in Q2, and he was unfortunately not in Q3. Everybody was just setting fast lap after fastest lap, as obviously the sun was coming down in Miami at that point, I don't know what went wrong there. I don't think we actually got an answer either. There were a lot of things actually that happened this weekend that we didn't get an answer about. Like, in the race, there are multiple things. They're just, noticing there, like, okay. I wish I had F1 TV so I'd go and check it out. Obviously, Sky restrict us massively from what we can watch. So I wish I could go back and watch it on F1 TV and see what was what. Because obviously you can do it live in the race, but you don't. You're not going to watch your drivers on board on Sky and miss the whole race, are you? Like, it. Yeah, I wish we had F1 TV, or at least I wish Sky offered us everything that F1 TV had, like, so you could watch back on demand and watch it the way that anybody else could. Like, yeah, it's not great, but the way the race direction was, we did miss out on a lot of stuff, and I've got on my notes from the weekend. I've got the best I could. I've not really. Obviously we missed some stuff. Crofty and Martin Brundle missed a big part in the Verstappen Leclerc battle that I'll go on about in a minute, or later on. It was towards the end of the race, but it was very. We missed a lot, and I'm still intrigued to see what happened in some bits, if you get me. But yeah, so George Russell out in qualifying, were a Mick Schumacher in P15, Ricciardo in P14. He was another one that got caught out like George did. He probably could have gotten P10 on pure pace if he was able to complete a proper run. Sebastian Vettel 13th, Russell was 12th, and then Alonso was 11th. So neither Alpine getting into Q3, obviously because Esteban was back at the grid because of the the crash on. Because Esteban is going to start at the back of the ring because of the crash on Friday. But there are 2 tenths between Pierre Gasly, who qualified P10, and Mick Schumacher, called him Michael again, in P15. There are 2 tenths literally between everybody in the elimination zone. So it just shows on a street track, if you make one tiny mistake, you're likely to be out in qualifying, and we saw that from Ricciardo, unfortunately. And then the other thing we can note from Q2, obviously, is that Lance Stroll got to Q3. Think about how bad that Aston Martin was and how much I was criticising Stroll in Bahrain and Jeddah. Like, Lance Stroll, and Seb obviously as well, but Stroll, particularly the last couple of weeks, has really turned his season around, and obviously getting that Aston into Q3 was a great achievement on a pretty decent weekend, up until that point anyway. I think as well, going back to Ricciardo, what actually happened as well was that he got put out on a different, it got put out later to everybody else, so he could better get to the line in time, and then obviously everybody else had finished at laps when he was just set in his lap, and the track just went like that. The track temperature just went like that, and he just couldn't get out of it. So I don't really know what Andreas Seidel and co were doing there, but yeah, unfortunate for Daniel Ricciardo. Obviously, he is he's very popular in the United States. So yeah, I think they won't have been happy about that, the American fans. So Q3, and then from the first runs, it was Verstappen on provisional pole. Leclerc, Sainz very close behind, literally within 0.08 seconds, so 800ths of a second between the top three. So it just shows that we had a pretty good battle for pole, and that the two Ferrari setups, that the two best setups, not the Ferrari setup, the two best setups of the Red Bull going very, very heavy on straight line speed, and the Ferrari going very, very heavy on the corners, heavily focusing on those areas. It offered us two different ways of going about the race, and obviously one setup was going to be better than the other, and one was clearly better than the other, especially at the start of the race as well, which we'll get into later. So then obviously Perez would have been P4, but he was about 5 tenths off all the others, I think. And then Valtteri Bottas was in P5, provisionally out qualifying his old teammate Lewis Hamilton, although Hamilton was on used tyres, obviously after the Q1 extra set of tyres used. But he should have been, I'll put here, should be faster than bottom final run, but he wasn't. And obviously there's a bit of drop off between like the Gaslys and Norrises from the top 4 and Bottas, from the top 3 teams and Bottas. But enough on who was on provisional pole with the initial run in qualifying 3. In Q3, the person on pole, as you know, was Charles Leclerc, and very next to him on Sunday's race was Carlos Sainz. It was a Ferrari front low lockout, which, I mean, it was kind of gifted to them, but obviously both of them did improve on their laps. So they both set faster lap times. Sainz was first, and Leclerc set about 2 tenths quicker than him. So they both improved on their pretty good times in the first place. Verstappen looked like he was on for a good lap, but he made a mistake on the twisty bit. I think it was like the turn 5, turn 6. The one, the bit goes like that. Obviously it's a new track, so I don't know what turn numbers are. At the moment there are a couple that like turn 14, turn 17, turn 11, the heavy braking zones of the chicane. But yeah, so Verstappen had to back out of his lap, and obviously didn't set a faster ones of his lap that was set in the provisional run, the first run, his provisional pole lap. But obviously his provisional pole lap was the one that he would go. That he qualified with. His teammate Sergio Perez started next to him, and then Valtteri Bottas was behind Verstappen in P5. Lewis Hamilton, he went faster on the new set of soft tyres, but Bottas put in one hell of a lap. And honestly, this is Valtteri fucking 2.0. This is Valtteri 2.0. This is. It is, I mean, the way he is driving at Alpha, it's amazing. Like, genuinely, he is up there driver of the season at this point. It's Valtteri, I think. He's had a great season so far. So obviously, like I was saying, Lewis qualified P6, and then it was Gasly in 7th, Norris in 8th, Tsunoda in 9th, and then Stroll in 10th, as you'd expect, because that Aston Martin is nowhere near the pace of the two AlphaTauris and the McLaren. And then came the main event, the race. Obviously, the race, I think it started at 8:30 last night. I can't, honestly, I didn't go to bed until 2 last night, so I can't really remember what time it was. I think it was 8:30, the race start. By the time about 8 o'clock came round on the Sky coverage, obviously, it was just before the Martin Brundle iconic grid walk. Obviously, it's always iconic, it always is, but this one, seeing all the celebrities on the grid, and obviously that moment where he thought that Paolo Banchero was Patrick Mahomes. Like, to be fair, like, from a distance, he does that, he has the Patrick Mahomes hairstyle and stuff. You could be past, but he's like 4 or 5 inches taller than Mahomes. So yeah, I think a little bit of a mistake for Martin there, but either way, it was very funny. There was a moment with DJ Khaled and Pharrell. There was a moment where Venus Williams just completely blanked in before doing the interview as well. It was. Yeah, and it shows as well what we really did miss the grid walks when they were gone. Like, all these new fans that are coming to sport lately, seeing this, are like, oh, what's going on? And same in the cool down room as well. It's like, oh, what's this? What's the cool down room? It's like, these are things that were iconic before. The COVID pandemic boom of Formula One, and they were and they were staples of the sport, and I love them. They were awesome. So big up Martin. But yeah, so it was probably my favourite. The Sky clipped it. I think you can watch it on YouTube if you've not seen it already. Obviously, I don't know why you'd be watching this if you hadn't seen the race. But if you do listen to this rather than watching the race, obviously, because it is behind a paywall, the whole thing, and obviously that's what this is for. This is me recapping the race for those who haven't seen it. But anyway, like I was saying, so just before Martin's grid walk, we had Ted come onto the Sky coverage and say that both Aston Martins were to start from the pit lane. Obviously a massive blow, both in pretty decent qualifying positions as well. It was a fuel problem, so the fuel was too cold, so it needed warming up, but they obviously, if they went to the grid, and they'd be given a penalty. So they decided to start from the pit lane and go onto the hard tyres and go long. A strategy that did actually prove pretty well for Aston Martin, as you know. But yeah, that was an unfortunate, and it was a big blow to a pretty good weekend for Aston Martin, that was. So strategy-wise, it was George Russell in P12, and then Ocon at the back of the grid, as well as Latifi, Vettel and Stroll all on the hard tyres. The rest of the grid was on medium tyres. So anyway, on to the race start. Now, as you know, it was a great start from Leclerc, getting off the line. Carlos Sainz a little bit slower. I think he got stuck behind his teammate as well, which allowed a great move from Verstappen sweeping round turn 2 and 3. That move from Max was one of the highlights of the weekend. That was an amazing move from Max getting up into P2. And obviously it wasn't long before he got into P1. So on the race start as well, so Lewis was down 2 places. Fernando Alonso had a great start, making up 4, but he did have contact with Lewis at the start. The Sky completely missed that. We didn't know that until Hamilton went to go overtake Alonso a couple of laps later. But yeah, so Lewis got tapped by Alonso, obviously hampering him, so he was down a couple of places. Alonso went up 4 places at the time. Obviously, he was penalised for that. Daniel Ricciardo up 3 as well from the race start, and then Mick Schumacher and Magnussen also up 3. Because of the Aston Martins, that don't really count, but you know, in the position up thing, they were up 3 places in their grid spot. So George Russell was down 3 places. He had an awful start. He did actually get away slightly on the formation lap as well, but obviously Russell's on the hard tyres, so it does take a while to get away on the starts. We saw that quite a few times this season. We saw that with the McLarens in Bahrain when they're both on the hard tyres towards the back of the grid. They were very, very far towards the back of the grid, and towards obviously throughout the whole of Bahrain, that race. The hard tyre warm up this season, especially the new Pirelli tyres, is especially bad on race starts. So obviously Russell from P12, he was by the time lap 3 came around, he was under the pressure from Alex Albon for P15. Now he did manage to stay ahead, but it did take a little bit of time for those tyres to warm up. So I was saying about Hamilton getting past Alonso, so that happened on lap 3. It was on the middle straight, so going into turn 11. So a couple of laps after making the move on Alonso and us finding out that there was a little bit of contact between the two of them on the first lap. I think it was lap 3 or 4. That was just after the overtake we found out about the Alonso tapping of Lewis, the Alonso incident at the time. But yeah, no. So a couple of laps after that, on lap 6, Hamilton went for a move on Pierre Gasly. He got him back as well, obviously, because he lost position to him on the start. But he came onto the radio saying he had damage, so he was struggling at the time, but still faster than the Alpine and the AlphaTauri. A lap later, on lap 7, we obviously saw the retirement of Zhou Guanyu. It turned out to be a hydraulic issue, I think it was. I think Ted said that on his note, but when I was watching it this morning, obviously it was last night, but I was busy last night. But no, so on Ted's notebook, I think he revealed it was a hydraulic issue. So Zhou was told, we have to stop. And he responds, I can't believe it, because, I mean, it looked like it might, the pace of the Alfa Romeo, obviously his qualifying result wasn't the best, but the pace of the Alfa Romeo, they could have gone up, I think maybe even got points. So yeah, Zhou was shocked, but yeah, that's the harsh reality of F1 really. He had the hydraulic issue on lap 7 and was out of the race. And then we saw Daniel Ricciardo suddenly P13. I don't really know what happened here. This is what I mean by that. We weren't told what happened there at all. So Ricciardo, who was up to I think P11 at the time on the race start, it might have been P12 actually. I think it might have been P12, but no, it was P11 on the race start, obviously because Stroll and Vettel dropped back. But yeah, so Ricciardo, who was up a couple places from where he qualified, he was suddenly P13. Both Hasses got past him, and we don't know what happened there. No one. I mean, he might have just been slow for a couple of laps. He got them back a couple of laps later, but yeah, Sky didn't indicate what happened to Ricciardo. He just literally dropped back a couple of places. I saw on Twitter, everyone was like, "What's going on here? What's going on here?" Nobody knew. But so Ricciardo was suddenly P13. It was like, "What? What's going on here?" But yeah, so I thought that was interesting. That's one of the many things that weren't picked up on the race coverage. So around lap 8 was when we saw the initial rumblings that Verstappen could be able to get past Leclerc at some point during the race. And it happened a lot quicker than we thought happened a lot quicker than we thought it would. Verstappen was told on the radio on lap 8, we're seeing damage to the front right of Leclerc's tyre, and then literally by the end of the lap he was in DRS range, and a chance to go for a move down the back straight. He wasn't close enough, but by the time turn 1 came round, Verstappen was ahead. Like, it was just, Sky didn't expect it to happen at the time. They cut to Ted Kravitz at the time, and it was just like, oh, excuse me, Ted, Verstappen's going for a move here. And he literally, the Red Bull straight line, it was literally just, it was ahead like that, and it just shows how quick that Red Bull is with the straight line speed, with that Honda power unit, Red Bull powertrain, whatever it is, like that. The way we were saying about the strategy differences, how Red Bull went straight line speed and Ferrari went to focus on the corners like they did in Imola and in Jeddah as well. It was a similar situation then. Now, in all 3 of those races, the Red Bull was the faster car. In Jeddah, Max was the fastest car. In Imola, Max was the fastest car. And in Miami, Max was the fastest car. So I don't know what... Maybe Ferrari have got... It was the same story as in Jeddah and in Imola as well. But, yeah, so Leclerc did his best to keep within DRS range. And he did for a couple of laps. But he every time he just couldn't compete with the Red Bull. It was just Max's car, and Max was in a different dimension on Sunday, and you could tell that it was very telling. Maybe the championship's not over. Obviously, we saw talking about these boys saying that the championship's over after 3-4 races. Well, the gap's narrowing now. It's going to be interesting now. But no, so yeah, the Red Bull was amazing. So on lap 10, we saw the start of Ricciardo making his moves back up the field. He had a lovely rate braking move down the inside of Tsunoda at turn 1. That was an amazing move, But no, so as Brundle hinted, it looked like the old Daniel Ricciardo, the move on Tsunoda up to P12. So Tsunoda, the lap after getting overtaken by Ricciardo, his tyres were dead. So he was the first to stop the hard tyres on the medium-hard strategy. And then a couple of laps later, we saw Russell getting a groove on the hard tyres. He was narrowing the gap to Ricciardo. Obviously, Russell moving up the field now after the terrible start because of the tyre strategy ultimately. But so by lap 14, he was in DRS range of Ricciardo. And he was past Ricciardo by the end of the lap. It was a switchback move after the straight around on turn 17. So at this point as well, we saw Charles Leclerc struggling with his tyres. Verstappen did a better job managing them, and he was dropping back a couple of times a lap to Max at the time. So he had a front, and the reason why it was as bad as it was as well is because there was a front right, because he had a front right lockup a couple of laps earlier. I think it was like up 12. I think Leclerc had a front right look up, so the gap to Max was like 3-4 seconds at this point. And then on lap 15, Mick Schumacher came in for hard tyres. Kevin Magnussen came in a lap before as well, but obviously that wasn't picked up on the coverage. So on lap 16, Fernando Alonso tried an undercut on Pierre Gasly coming into the pits behind before him obviously joining the party of the hard tyres, but it didn't work because it was a slow stop. The rear right was slow to go on, Gasly remained way in front of Alonso. And then a lap after that, lap 17, we saw this great battle between Vettel and Latifi. It was on the exit of the middle straight, the one that goes up into the turn 14, the chicane, that one. So the two of them wheel to wheel going around the loopy bit going into the chicane at turn 14, and then Seb was the bravest, so Latifi had to back out, and Seb got the move done. Obviously, the Aston Martin making moves up the field now after starting at the back of the grid, or starting from the pit lane, with the fuel cooling issue. So we saw Magnussen, who came out behind the two of them, overtake Latifi on the back straight as well on that very same lap. And then lap 18, we saw Sergio Perez get a little bit closer to Carlos Sainz. And this is probably the most interesting battle of the race for the majority of it, this Sainz-Perez battle. So he was within DRS range by the time lap 18 came around. And then while this is going on as well, so whilst Perez is chasing down Sainz, we also saw George Russell lapping faster than Norris, and Hamilton as well on the old mediums, and he was closing on Norris as well. So McLaren, to combat that, bring in Lando for the hard tyres, but it was a slow stop, and it comes out in the middle of the two Aston Martins and Magnussen behind. But obviously Lando had the colder tyres, so both Seb and Magnussen managed to get past Lando by the time the lap finished. And also Mick Schumacher, I think it was a lap later, or maybe in turn 17. No, turn 17, he got overtaken by 3 of the cars, did Lando, because obviously he couldn't get the hard tyres up to temperature, and where it came out as well with the, almost like a DRS train that formed a couple of laps later. He was right on the back of that. But yes, the move, I can't remember the Vettel move, but the move from Magnussen was amazing. It was around the, I think it was around the outside of turn 8 from Kevin Magnussen. It was beautiful, one of the best moves of the race, particularly. Magnussen just stuck it down there and out there. Sorry, and it was a great move from Magnussen. But whilst this was all going on with Lando, Sergio Perez came onto the radio and was like, "I'm losing power." And honestly, Perez, I was so scared. He was using a couple seconds to Sainz per lap because whilst it was going on, like, it was a very nervous exchange between Perez and his engineer. It was, they were just saying, "Oh, don't worry, all this." And he's like, "No, I'm failing. Look at the fail reader." And he's like, yeah, it was when it eventually got fixed on lap 21, so it was going on for what, 2-3 laps. But yeah, so it was just a problem that was eventually fixed, but it did leave him with 20 kilowatts less power than he started the race with, obviously. But in that time where he was down on power, he lost 7 seconds to Sainz, and who was about to overtake, and he couldn't get that done for now anyway. Lap 23, Lewis Hamilton came into pit. It was a great stop. He came out ahead of Ricciardo as well, who was yet to stop. But if he was behind Ricciardo, he could have been held up. Lewis's main competitor was George, but obviously Bottas could have got a further gap on his former teammate. His former teammate. And then Charles Leclerc set a fastest lap on his tyres that looked dead. But then on literally the lap after, he came on saying the car is so difficult to drive. So I don't know whether that was, he was just trying going, okay, get the life out of these tyres quickly before you come in. Which I think was the case, because a lap later on lap 25, Leclerc came in for the hard tyres. And he came up crucially ahead of Valtteri Bottas. So they didn't have to overtake Bottas, and he was right behind the lead pack of the two Red Bulls and his teammate Sainz as well. And then this is when we saw the DRS train form and the start of a pretty boring middle section of the race. So it was from Alonso in P11 to Magnussen in P14. They were stuck in this train. It is becoming quite a new, it's not gone away, the DRS trains, unfortunately. Obviously, the last 2 tracks have been pretty poor for racing. Spain's the same, as is Monaco. We're not going to get a proper banger of a race, probably till Silverstone. Actually, got Baku that's a lie. Got Baku in Canada, in between Silverstone and all those. So I can't remember what order it goes on. I think it's Baku then Canada. So Baku in the middle of June. That's the next good race we're going to get, unfortunately, because the 2 ones at the end of May in Catalonia, or Barcelona, Catalonia, the circuit of Catalonia, and Monaco are not going to be great races. So it is unfortunate this sort of early sort of dead track mash at the start. Now Monaco is great. People want to get rid of Monaco. I don't. It's the history of it. You can't get rid of it. Spain, all for it, personally. But no. There is these tracks being clumped together. It isn't great. When you're probably going to get 4 boring races with DRS trains stuck in a row. Now the new regs are better, but they're not perfect. So the racing was quite poor, and will be poor until Baku, I expect. So Verstappen actually waited a couple of laps until lap 26 before he came into pit for the medium tyres. A 2.4 second stop, a great stop from Red Bull. And he came out in front of Perez as well, which is great. So obviously Perez backing off a little bit, helping his teammate out, obviously, who was leading the race as well. Awesome job from Red Bull onto the hard tyres, obviously, as well. And then Bottas also came in for the hard tyres on that lap as well. And then on lap 27, Sainz and Perez both come in for the hard tyres. But Sainz's stop was slow, which allowed Perez to actually make up some of the gap. It was a 5.4 second stop. So he was actually very close to old Carlos was Checo by the time he came out. Both of them came out of the pit lane. So that was a bit of a lifeline for Perez after the after the power outage. So at this point as well, so Daniel Ricciardo was the only driver in the medium tyres who hadn't pit yet. And the reason why as well was because Stroll and Vettel, who obviously were the two hard drivers, and we were also on a bit of pace compared to Latifi and Albon, or naturally Albon wasn't on hard, but compared to Latifi, Stroll and Vettel were holding up the midfield, so they're holding up Lando, Mick, Kevin as well. They were holding up them. So McLaren decided to keep Ricciardo in for a couple more laps. Obviously, he was lapping pretty well on the medium tyres. Just decided to keep him in. He was literally in a world of his own after Lewis shot back down out of the distance. Just kept Ricciardo out, because if he'd be stuck behind the train that Lando was stuck behind at the time. So they just. They kept Ricciardo out, hoping to sort of jump them, hoping that they would be held up, but it didn't work. So he came in lap 31, and he was actually 7 seconds behind, also, behind the train, and he came up behind Albon as well on P17. So the gap didn't form like they hoped it would. And then so the last for about 5 or so laps, between lap 31 and 36, 37 or so, we saw all these cars jostling for position. So we had the two Aston Martins, the two Hasses, Lando as well. They were all sort of jostling for position, mixing up and stuff, and it was really hard to keep track of. But on lap 36, Stroll was actually sort of bridged a little bit of a gap. He was finding a little bit more pace in the hard tyres. Obviously, the hard tyre runners were great at the start of the race. That strategy actually proved pretty well. Obviously, the safety car helped them, but the Haas swapped Schumacher and Magnussen, so Schumacher went out in front at the time to try and chase down Stroll, and they did manage to chase down Stroll as well, obviously. Vettel looked up at turn 17 on lap 36 as well, so another Norris rounded 18 and 19 going into the pit straight ahead. So that was a mistake from Seb and Lando being able to get up one position of on the train anyway. And then at this time as well, sort of in the late lap 30s or so, the hard tyres are just hoping and begging for a safety car. They're like, or even a VSC, just so they can just pull in. And at this time as well, Lewis Hamilton is closing on Valtteri Bottas, and we saw the striking distance 4 laps graphic come back. I mentioned that last time in Imola. I was like, oh, okay, bring this back. They actually did bring it back, so I was surprised by that. So that safety car they were hoping for, it eventually came. There were 2 incidents that caused this. So on lap 39, we saw Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly make contact. Alonso went for the move down the inside. Gasly was ahead, turning into the corner. And then Alonso locked up, going for the move down the inside. Or not going for the move, but, in the inside, he locked up and he went into the side of Gasly, and Gasly sort of had a little. But so Gasly was out of sorts, and he had a little bit of damage to the right hand side of his car as well. So he got passed by Stroll at that point as well, just out of sorts. And then Pierre makes a mistake on the very next lap, lap 40. So he sort of goes over to the side and sort of regroups. And so he goes wide, backs off, regroups to rejoin the track. And then, but the place he chose to rejoin the track was actually very dangerous because there was a very low visibility. So as Lando Norris was coming round, Pierre obviously must have not been able to see him, and came out at the wrong time and just sent Lando like that, spinning, and his right the tyre of his right wheel came off, and Lando was out the race. Unfortunately, didn't see him, and obviously it is Pierre's fault, but. That caused the VSC and then a full safety car as well. I was gutted for Lando because he probably might have got points. He might have done. He might have got points. So that Lando unfortunate crash set up the safety car. So it was a VSC then upgraded to a full safety car, as I was saying. So this is the time for all the hard tyre runners to just dive in for medium tyres. Some even for softs as well. Some for softs. So Russell came for the medium straight away. He was the biggest gainer straight away. A lot of them sort of came in a couple of laps later, or maybe a lap later, just when they can get round to the track and it was safe to do so. And also when there was a big enough gap, or whenever to get the biggest advantage to change tyres. So Sergio Perez was one of those who changed tyres again. There was a couple. He had nothing to lose. It was a free stop ahead of Bottas to try and overtake the Ferraris. Now, obviously, the Ferraris were on the hard tyres as well. So having a softer set of tyres, I think it was the mediums with Checo. Sorry, heavy bloody hell. Having a softer set of tyres, obviously means he's more likely to overtake the Ferraris on the race restart. And then Alonso actually got a 5-second penalty during the safety car period as well for the Gasly collision. So some more big gainers. So Albon was up into 11th, Stroll and Vettel 12th and 14th respectively. Mick Schumacher was up in 9th. He was on track for his first points. Magnussen was down at 14th because he came in for new mediums, so like Perez did. And then so Gasly also coming to the radio saying, I think the rear right is broken. So Gasly came on the radio saying his rear right was broken and retired as well. Obviously that damage was from the Alonso incident, not the Lando one. But yeah, so the safety car came in on lap 47, and Verstappen had a great restart. And Perez as well, all over the back of Sainz, but no move into turn 1. Ricciardo in 15th and Ocon 10th, both on soft tyres. They were two ones that came in for, Ocon going hard to soft, and Ricciardo coming in for the new softs like Magnussen and Perez did. They were both on the soft tyres. They were looking to get out of the field and hopefully squeeze into the points positions. Well, Ocon higher up in the points positions, but Ricciardo squeezing into the points positions. So yeah, Daniel Ricciardo got up 2 places in the restart. Vettel up 2 places as well. Stroll was down 3 because he went wide at some point. There was a yellow flag off literally briefly, and they were like, oh, it went wide. We didn't actually see it, but that's what happened. Hamilton had a very good restart. He was all over the back of Bottas, and George Russell was just behind him as well. I've got here will be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, will the two Mercedes switch with Russell on softer tyres and newer tyres as well. So we saw Sainz make a mistake at the end of that lap, and in the very next lap, we saw he went wide at turn 18 and lap 47, and then very next lap 48, Perez couldn't get the move done. I think it was just before the DRS kicks in. Obviously, I think he was just waiting for that. Obviously, he was down in power as well. And then we saw Leclerc close up very quickly to Max Verstappen, something we were not expecting. And Leclerc was actually lapping a little bit faster than Verstappen as well at the time. But yeah, so and then lap 49 was when Leclerc had the DRS and Verstappen, and then Sainz and Perez, but nothing was happening at the time. Bottas went very wide. That obviously would keep track of multiple battles here. It was a mad restart. So Bottas went very wide when he had the two Mercedes behind him, literally almost into the wall. Like it was literally like here. It was like okay, Bottas is this close to the wall. It was very weird, actually, that those series of events. So Bottas very wide about to sneeze. Oh, man. Yeah, so in making that mistake, both Lewis and George got past Valtteri. Russell was actually trying to get past Hamilton at the time, just shortly after, but he couldn't. Lewis literally wouldn't yield, which is a little bit closer than you expect those two to be. Obviously, Lewis has had the Rosberg years. I think Mercedes was sort of hoping more for the Bottas years, but I don't think that'll be the case. I think it'll be sort of like a ground in between them, to be fair. And then on lap 50, literally Charles looked like he was actually going to get past Max. It was like, okay, yeah, this is happening. We're going to see a great end to the race. It's going to be similar to, it's going to be similar to Jeddah. We're going to see literally racing to the very last lap. That's what I was going to say before I stopped talking, sorry. So it will be similar to Jeddah. And that was confirmed when Charles had looked down the inside of Max and going down into turn 11. He did a sort of go for a move, then had to back out, obviously, but still remained within a couple tenths of Max at the time. Yeah, so he had to look down the inside of the middle straight, but didn't have enough to go for the move on the middle straight or down the back straight as well. So it took another lap before he could actually have another look. While this is going on as well, George Russell gets past Lewis Hamilton on lap 51. Literally, they're side by side. It was just who's going to back out first. George goes wide at some point as well, but sticks in line with Lewis, and Lewis just has to yield at that point. But yeah, like I said, just getting a lot closer than I think Toto would like them to. But at the end, it makes sense to put George ahead anyway. So for the sake of the team. But yeah, so George was the bravest of the two. I've used that a lot today, actually. But he went ahead into P6. P5 actually, because of course it was P5 because of Bottas, yeah. As we saw lap 52, as Leclerc and Verstappen were just sort of as normal, just Verstappen having a faster car in straight line and being able to stick ahead. Perez was a lot closer to Carlos Sainz on the pit straight. Literally, like, he looked like he was going to get a move done, but he shot down the inside and actually outbraked himself, which obviously I don't think he looked up, but it was very heavy on the brakes, and that allowed Sainz to sort of just create some breathing room between the two of them, getting that quickly. And I've just got a Sainz likely to keep P3 now because I'm writing these notes as they happen. And then so after literally seconds after that was going on, we just saw Leclerc within literally 2 tenths of Max going into the back straight, but he mounted the curb. Like, this is Charles' time to do it right, and they missed this on Sky, right? So Charles mounted the curb on that 52, sorry, 50, I think it was 52, yeah. So on that 52, if you go back and watch this, you will see this, right? So Charles mounted the curb at turn 14. I think it was the first of the two. He just sort of went very aggressive over the thing, over the chicane, similar to like he did at Imola, chasing down Perez, and he sustained damage. I don't know where the damage came from, but going over the curb, he sustained damage, and because Sky were like, he's going to get him, down to turn 17, and Leclerc just couldn't. He was further back than we expected, and a bit of bodywork fell off. I don't know if anyone else saw this. I'm certain I saw this when I was on the race. A little bit of bodywork fell off. I think it was from Leclerc's front wing. And if you go back and watch it, I think it's lap 52 when going down to turn 17 to the back straight of the Miami track, you'll see going into turn 14, so the chicane a bit under the bridge. Yeah, so Leclerc hits a curb there, mounts a curb, and and then it looks fine at the time. Martin Brundle was like, okay, a bit too heavy on the curb for my liking. And then as you can see, the two of them going down, there's a shot literally going into the braking zone of turn 17, the massively long back straight. Yeah, Leclerc's. There's a bit of damage that falls, a bit of I don't know what it is, a bit of bodywork that falls off Charles' car, and he's the very next lap he's out of the DRS range of Max, and no one Sky didn't pick up on it. But yeah, Sky didn't pick up on it. I don't know if anyone else did, but it was weird, and obviously that's why Charles went from 2 tenths behind to out of DRS range in 1 lap of Max, because there was a little bit of damage from mounting the curb. That they didn't mention that on the race at all, and I don't know, it annoyed me the way that was covered at the time. Yes, that was it. The battle over between Verstappen and Leclerc. Verstappen was set to win the Grand Prix. And that was pretty much it on track action. Well, it was, other than the one incident, which, very sad. Lap 54, Mick Schumacher on the verge of his first F1 points. He's just been so unlucky over the last couple months, at the start of the season. And he was tussling with his old sort of friend, sort of fatherly figure, I guess, because this in Seb Vettel, who had made up a fair few places by now, obviously starting P14 in the restart. I think they were P8, P9 at the time. So the two of them were having great races, and the two of them collide. It was both of them were out of the race as well. I mean, Schumacher came 15th, 16th, but Seb was out of the race fully. So Schumacher was looking to overtake his friend Vettel, and Brundle said the same as well. Martin Brundle was like, "Oh, you can't be friends with F1 drivers," which I mean, I don't know, maybe because they're different because of the way that Michael Schumacher was with Seb when Mick's dad was with Seb when he was younger in his career. It was the same sort of thing, but it's just. Yeah, it was sad. I was like, oh no, just when this happened. But if you haven't watched it, because this is what it's people for, this is for the people that haven't watched it. So Schumacher was going for a move, or maybe looking for a move down the inside of turn 1, and whilst Seb was turning into the corner, and Mick was like, on the radio, he said, "It's my corner." But yeah, so he I think he locked up and just went into Seb whilst he was turning the corner. So that caused Seb to retire, and that caused Mick's front wing to break, obviously, and it put him essentially out of the race as well. Unfortunately, it's quite sad actually, because you could see both of them were just like, oh no, what happened? Both were upset that it did happen after the race and the interviews that they did with Rachel Brooks. It shows. I don't know. I feel sad about it. Mick was so close, and then that happened, and it was Seb as well. And it's just hard to talk about. I don't really know. It's just sad. Yeah, it's unfortunate for the two of them, because I'm a massive Seb fan, and with Mick as well. I'm a big fan of Mick as well. So it is It's sad just thinking about it. It's both run for the points, essentially, and neither of them did. So it's just, sad. But that was it. That was it for the race, basically. Verstappen rounded turn 19 and won the race. He won the Miami Grand Prix. The checkered flag was waved by Tua Tagovailoa, the Miami Dolphins quarterback. No, I missed it at the time. I don't know if they showed a replay or should have should a replay of Tua waving the checker flag afterwards or not, but bear in mind I'm a Dolphins fan, seeing Tua wave the checker flag, I was like, oh my god, that's my quarterback. I think a lot of people would, I like that. I mean, Bills fans seeing Josh Allen on the grid, Chiefs fans hearing that Patrick Mahomes is there. I think they must have had the same thing. Especially the ones that watch F1. It's like, oh, hang on a minute, what's this, Tua in F1? That's what I was like. So, but so seeing my quarterback wave the checker flag at a Grand Prix was very weird, but so it was Verstappen who won, Charles Leclerc second, Carlos Sainz rounding up the podium. Obviously Perez couldn't get it for P4, and then it was George and Lewis in P5 and P6 behind the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, Valtteri Bottas in P7, Ocon in P8, a great drive from Ocon, we'll get into that in a minute, but quickly, it was a great drive from Ocon. He got points in the end from starting P20. Behind Ocon, it was actually Alonso, his Alpine teammate, in P9. He was investigated for leaving the track and gaining an advantage towards the end of the race, so he could have got his second penalty. And there was more penalties as well. So Dan Ricciardo got a 5-second penalty for doing the same thing, and got relegated down to P13. And then Kevin Magnussen got another one for causing a collision on Stroll on the last lap. Doesn't really matter as he retired anyway, but Kevin Magnussen got a penalty as well. And then the last penalty did come in was the Alonso penalty, which relegated him to P11, which means Lance Stroll was in the points in P10 and Alex Albon was in P9 in the Williams. Alex, ever since he's been doing this thing with his red hair, we've seen it a lot on Sky. They were talking about it pretty much the whole weekend. But the Alex Albon is getting the most out of that Williams car, and they've not scored points 3 races in a row, but they've come 10th, 11th, 9th, 3 races in a row. Bear in mind how they look like the worst car probably with the Aston Martins in Bahrain and Jeddah, and both the Aston Martins and the Williams having cars in the points. It just shows that the racing is a lot closer, and the teams as well. The gap between the teams is a lot closer, especially in midfield. The gap between the teams is a lot closer behind the front runners, which are sort of far away. But it's great that the back of the grid, you've got different cars and the points each time, different different cars are suited to different tracks. It's awesome. It really is awesome. I like it. So that's the race breakdown. I guess let's go through and let's grade everybody on their race. So Verstappen in P1, I'll give him an A. Pretty good race from start to finish. Obviously qualifying stops him from getting an A star. It wasn't really, he definitely did make mistakes here. His qualifying mistakes wasn't from getting an A star, but a pretty good weekend from Verstappen. So I'll give Charles Leclerc a B. He did obviously he was on pole, so that gives him extra points, but he was very far off Max. He made a mistake as well. He was very far off Max in the first first stint on the medium tyres. It wasn't until the very end that he was close. Obviously he made a mistake on the curb as well, so I'll give Charles a B for getting pole position, but he had the chance to at least try and make a move for Max, and he messed up again, unfortunately. Charles, it's sad to say that when I'm literally wearing a Ferrari shirt myself, but I'll give Charles a B. Carlos, I'll give him a C. He was quick on Friday and Saturday, but on Sunday he got passed by Max, almost got passed by Checo. Let's give Perez a C as well. I think he was this is more like the last season Perez than it was this season Perez. He was a bit far off Max in qualifying and on Friday as well, and he made a mistake with Sainz as well. So we'll give Perez a C as well. George, he was lucky with the safety car, but he made his way up the field. I'll give him a B. Just because obviously qualifying wasn't really his fault either. I don't know what happened there. So from what I know, I'll give George a B. Lewis, we'll give Lewis a B as well. He out-qualified his teammate. That's always a bonus. Obviously, he was slower than Bottas, but that Mercedes is so difficult. I think giving him a B, I think it probably makes sense. Yeah, I think a B sort of sums Lewis up. He had a decent weekend, obviously not as good as the next man, Valtteri Bottas. So even though he made the mistake, just being up there now for a mate, I'll give him an A. I think it is a great weekend other than that very one mistake. Qualifying was on point. He's on pace with the Mercedes the whole race as well. I'll give Valtteri an A, Lewis a B. Ocon, I'll give him an A straight away. That he had the crash, so it's difficult. But I give Ocon an A just from that great drive. Obviously, he was held up by the safety car, but he was still making his way out the field as well. Albon and P9 A straight away, getting the Williams in the points. You got to applaud it. And then Lance Stroll and P10 also an A, getting an Aston in the points. Same thing. Alonso, he's going to get a C. It was pretty fast on his teammate at points as well. He did overtake Ocon before they switched the cars towards the end. But no, yeah, so Alonso, I'll probably give him a C. Just stupid, loads of penalties and stuff, causing collisions and stuff. Yeah, just C, D. Actually, maybe probably a D. I'll give Alonso a D. It's a shame because he has been unfortunate the majority of the season, and then, yeah, this one's actually deserved. Tsunoda, I'll give him a C. Pretty non-eventful for this race. Ricciardo, again, a C. Like, he had the chance to, but went over. He was given a penalty for a reason, and actually wasn't lapping that quickly anyways. Yeah, Latifi a C, performing as expected. Schumacher a C. Yeah, because if you think about it, he didn't finish the race. Yeah, so Mick a C, and then Vettel, Magnussen, Gasly, Norris, and Zhou didn't finish the race, so I won't grade them. But yeah, so got interesting ones there, so I'll go through it again. So Verstappen an A, Charles a B, Sainz a C, Perez a C, George a B, I think it was Hamilton a... let's see this one, but it says give Hamilton a... Let's give Lewis a B as well. Bottas an A, I think it was a B for Lewis anyway. Ocon an A, Albon an A, Stroll an A, Alonso a C, Tsunoda a C, Ricciardo a C, Latifi a C, Schumacher a C. Let's go for that with my ratings. That's pretty much it for this edition of the SJMoores podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching as well. If you come over from the clip on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, thank you for that. It's always good to get promotion out on those. Obviously, it's a mainly audio podcast. I don't want the file size of doing a video for podcast is mental. I can't be dealing with that. But I hope you do enjoy the clips on the social media platforms. But I think the Miami Grand Prix, just takeaways. It wasn't. I don't know. The fanfare, everything was all right, but the race was a bit dead, wasn't it? Let's be real. The track's a bit boring. The sections of the track that the drivers hate. I don't know if you saw the interview with George on Sky last night, but George was just criticising it. Like, he said about 20 bad things before he said a good thing about the track, saying, "Oh, I like that it was in Miami," or something like that. But yeah, I don't know how long it will stick around. Obviously, the money probably will stick around for a long time, but I think they'll change it. I think knowing Garfinkel, he'll probably and the Liberty as well, I think they'll probably change something by the time it comes around in a couple of years' time. Obviously next year they might not change it for next year, but in a couple of years I reckon they might change something, whether it's the layout or something like that. But obviously I think at least event wise the Miami Grand Prix was a success. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it too. But that's it for the SJMoores podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a good rest of the day, everyone, whether it's evening or night. I hope you have a good rest of the day.